Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Welcome back, friends, to another podcast with Harvesting Wisdom. I'm your host, Mike McMahon, and with me today is Scott Forsberg with Vine to Bar, his latest adventure. And he's a serial entrepreneur. I've been talking with him about all of his different businesses in the past, and he's got quite an interesting story. The mission at Harvesting Wisdom is to tell the stories of individuals and organizations that are climate friendly, that believe in proper land management, and we believe that is a cornerstone to a healthy planet. Scott, welcome today.
Thanks, Mike. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. I'm going to go a little into your paraphrase a little bit of your history, and you and I have been talking, and I could probably talk to you for hours because you are a wealth of knowledge, and that's what we're trying to do is get this wisdom. So you started off in Utah, a place that I've spent a lot of time skiing with my kids. What part of Utah, by the way, were you from?
Well, if you skied a lot, have you been up to Snow Basin?
Oh yeah, Ogden
Which
area.
is so I just live at the foot of the mountain on the south side there.
Do you still have property there? Do you ski? Have you ski? Did you ski
I
as a
do.
kid? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I grew up skiing, and I live here now. Actually.
Oh, you
This
do?
is where
Okay.
my home is. The company's based in California, but I actually still live in Utah. So
Ah,
we
great.
uh, we go up and ski in about 10 minutes from door to lift.
I love it. I have a good friend there who grows mushrooms. I'll have to hook you up. He's right in that area. He does indoor culinary mushrooms. Be
Oh, that
something
would be great.
interesting for you to, tell. Now, mushrooms, so you're a bacteria guy. A bacteria is more of a plant and a mushroom is more of an animal, right? But we talked about your history, and your history was in microbiology, really, your education. And
That's right.
you went to Japan. Yesterday I had another guest that had gone to Japan. I've been to Japan. I love it. And I was talking with him, and I kind of jokingly say, the Japanese do everything we do. They just do it a little better. They're kind of perfectionists about what they do. And I think they have a wonderful culture from a standpoint of being able to teach the rest of us how to get along. There's a lot of them on a small island, and that island is clean, and people are civilized, and everybody is employed at peers, and I don't see much in the way of homelessness or anything, but they're an important part of the planet. And you went there for a year or so, came back, you ran a couple of different companies, and you started your own, and then you got to Vine to Bar. But I just gave the highlights. Why don't you fill the audience in with exactly what you did?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, that was a pretty good description. Microbiology uh, really touches on a lot of different things. A lot of people in microbiology, they end up working in food, some end up working in pharma, other people go on to med school. And I think people are starting to appreciate maybe a little more just how much that bacteria really have to do with our lives, right? So, for example, the reason I went to Japan largely was to work in biotech, which is where you use bacteria to create things that are useful for people, almost like making a plant that you can then get something useful out of, whether it's taking canola oil from the seeds of the rape plant, or whether you're getting beta carotene out of a carrot or whatever. You can use bacteria to do that same thing. So, and the Japanese, they've been doing fermented foods for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not longer. So they really understand that world very well. They're very comfortable with it. And I learned a lot about it from going over there and studying that. So a lot of the food microbiology stuff was, something I was interested in. I was also interested, though, in the effects of all these things on human health directly, or as therapeutics or interventions. And so when I came back from Japan, I was working with a company called Solar Ray, and Solar Ray is the flagship brand of what used to be the Nutraceutical Corporation. Now it's been sold and it's a different company. But I really started to look into this area of dietary supplements, right? How can we take nutrition and use it mindfully and therapeutically in ways to actually help increase people's wellness and health? And that's really where I kind of got started on the path that I'm on now, was with that company and the idea of dietary supplements.
Wow.
So
It's sometimes I wish I had all my podcast guests on at the same time. I just was talking with Michelle Harris yesterday, and she's big on, became a vegan at a young age, but she is big on a lot of these same micro ingredients that help your health when you ingest them dietarily, but also cosmetics, which you would also
right.
said that you were involved with. I look at it from a standpoint because we have the soil company, Soil, Seed, and Water, and all of it is in the soil, right? And that's what we do. We've got over 30 different blends, depending on if you're growing grapes, if you're growing avocados, or grasses, or pretty much any kind of lettuce or any kind of vegetables. And we start with compost from both a dairy lot, a couple of different dairies, and also from chicken. And then we start. That's the base for most of our products. But we're also bringing in, different ingredients like zeolite and biochar, and they're all organically mined or produced products that go together, but they all are so purposeful. And what we look at is an analysis of the soil, before and after, and not just that. We do tissue samples and water samples because it's all related. But I think the soil health is like the basis for everything we do on the planet. If and I'm not necessarily saying you should never spray an herbicide or fungicide, or never use a fertilizer, that you deem that you need in your production as a farmer. But generally speaking, if you get soil health, you can reduce weed pressure, and you can reduce disease, and you can grow better tasting vegetables. So when I see these products like you're producing and you've done, I look at that it's kind of like that circular world we're talking about, right? That holistic concept. If it's in the soil, and it's healthy for the soil, chances are it's healthy for the plant, and it's healthy for humans, right? So bacteria and the
Yeah.
microbiology, bacteria is kind of one half of it. Then you have the actinocytes, which I can never pronounce correctly, and then you have fungi and maybe algae, and those are the kind of the keystone microbiology products. And if you tend to the land management correctly, and you don't overtill, or you have cover crops, and you do correct crops in rotation or companion crops, you can actually really, really improve your biology. And if you do, then that's great. And so let's fast forward to your newest venture, which is the Vine to Bar. And tell me what you're doing with that. You're using grape extracts, and you're partners in that. You're working with Sonoma Ceuticals.
Sonoma Ceuticals is actually the name of the company. Vine to Bar
Okay.
is the brand name, but
Oh,
the
okay.
company itself is called Sonoma Ceuticals. Yep.
Okay.
And so Vine to Bar is, that's a chocolate brand that we have. Here it is right here.
Uh-huh.
Um, we sell it online. We're now selling it also on the West Coast, mostly in Northern California. We're in Oliver's and other grocery stores there, a lot of different chains, starting to expand that brand. But it really started out as just kind of a proof of concept for the material that Sonoma Pharmaceuticals makes. And that is this material right here. It's called Wellvine. So we sell that separately too. But Wellvine is actually a zero waste upcycled grape powder that we make from Chardonnay wine grapes. And what a lot of people don't know about, winemaking is that when you make red wine, you take red grapes and you macerate them, which is just a fancy word for saying that they're already starting to ferment, right? So
Right.
you're starting that process of making alcohol from the grapes before you press them. So they will macerate for a period of time. That period of time can be a week, a couple of weeks, whatever. And then you press it and you take that partially fermented juice and you continue the winemaking process. But when you use white grapes, those grapes are pressed fresh. In fact, we get the material that comes out of the wine press many times. We'll get it within 12 or 18 hours of it being picked off the vine. So it's essentially fresh fruit, right? So we take that fresh fruit, we clean it, we dry it, and we use a proprietary process to do that so that we don't lose all of these really interesting compounds that are in there, all of these nutrients that are rich in fresh fruit that if you aren't careful with your temperature or aren't careful in the way you handle it or the way that you mill it and process it, you can actually end up destroying some of that nutrition that's inherent in the fresh fruit. So we do everything we can to preserve that, and we turn it into a zero waste product, meaning we don't throw anything away. We keep 100% of the edible part of what comes out of a wine press. We don't extract it. We don't concentrate it. We don't, just take out the protein and the stream that you have to deal with, or something else to throw away, or something else to try and find a use for. We use it all, and that material is called Wellvine, and that's what we've put into the chocolate.
And so you have stems and seeds occasionally in there and skin and everything.
There, absolutely, there's always seeds. There's 30% of the biomass is seeds,
Wow.
and actually that's a good thing. You want that. Those
It's your
seeds have a
oil and
lot of
everything.
nutrition. That's where you get the oil from. It's where you get a lot of the antioxidants, these polyphenols that people hear about a lot, flavanols, flavonoids. A lot of those are very high in the seed. And then the seed also has some really interesting fiber components too. Fiber that in particular can feed your microbiome
So you're
and help
you're
to have a healthy gut.
you're crushing it, then you're drying it, and then you're pulverizing it. And
Correct.
what have you? You're a science guy, so what
Mhm.
percentage of nutrient value do you think it retains? I have another friend that I'll have on the podcast that does this process with all fruits and vegetables on a big, long dryer, and I've bought his product. I've got the different powders and delicious in smoothies and in recipes, and he believes it's about 90% nutrient value that he's able to capture. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good number. I don't know what his process is, but it sounds a lot like ours. And I would say that that's true, that we're in that range as well, 90 plus percent of mind. I can give you an example. Um, so if you look at a table grape, of course, table grapes don't have seeds,
Hmm.
and they're great big, I mean, they're delicious, but there's a lot of water in there and there's a lot of sugar in a table grape, right?
Hmm.
They have thin skins as well. They've been optimized for sweetness and for flavor and everything. But if you look at a wine grape, it's quite small. It has a
Hmm.
thicker skin than a table grape would, and it's going to have two, and depending on the season, you sometimes get three seeds per grape, per berry, and they're very large. So you have a lot of mass in one of those grapes that you wouldn't have in a traditional table grape. If you compare the USDA recommended serving for table grapes with our material and you look at just fiber, for example, which is one of the things that we're really good at delivering, you can get the same amount of fiber in a serving of table grapes in 1 gram of our material. So that's all it takes in order to get the same amount of fiber that you get in a whole serving of table grapes.
Right.
So we know that it's packed with nutrition. Same thing with antioxidants. We see very high levels of antioxidants in our material. Thicker skins, we've got the seeds, we've got all that stuff that's packed in there. Less sugar. Most of the sugar goes actually to making wine production, so you see a dramatic reduction in sugar. So as a percentage of our material, fiber and antioxidants like flavonols are very, very high.
Okay.
So
Dude, how about any other nutrient benefits? I mean, that right there, the fiber and the antioxidant, that's enough. But do you have a nutrient value as well? A protein or a
we
potassium
do.
or
So the protein can vary a little bit depending on the season. It's a seasonal crop, and we're not extracting it. So the protein can vary a little bit depending on that season's crop and what it's like. And like I said, if it has two seeds or three seeds, because most of the protein is in the seed. So you'll see anywhere from 10 to 15, 16% protein. You'll see somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5% of oil or fat. And then the rest of it is going to be minerals, carbohydrates, and vitamins and antioxidants.
and okay, so if I buy the powder, and I get lots of different powders, I get hemp powder because we're my soil company. We also do hemp seed, and we're involved in the hemp
Yeah.
space. But it's a superfood. Would you compare that
Yep.
with chia seed and a hemp seed and that ballpark as a superfood? Is that what you'd consider this?
So in certain measures, ours will exceed those as a superfood. So
Great.
when you look at antioxidants, for example, ours is going to be way, way up there, right? If you look at protein, the hemp and the chia will probably have a little more protein than ours will. For one thing,
Hmm.
they're using only the seeds, they're not using the rest of the plant.
True.
We're using the whole berry,
So you
right?
get
So we're
more
going to have
fiber too.
fiber. But the interesting thing about the fiber that's in our product, when you look at fiber, fiber is really just carbohydrates.
Right.
So if you take
Cellulose.
sugar, fructose, glucose, and you put them together, you know, then you get these chains that build up and they become larger and larger. And the larger they are, the more their biological activity starts to change. So the very largest ones are called polysaccharides, and those polysaccharides, a lot of them actually are interesting for the immune system. Then you have the simple sugars, mono and disaccharides, which those are the ones that they give you energy and they give you a boost, but they can also affect your insulin levels and your blood sugar levels. So you want to make sure you don't get too much of those. A little bit is great, it makes foods taste better. It's good for instant energy, but you have to be careful how much you get. And then you have something in between those two that's called an oligosaccharide. So oligo means few, poly means many. So you have polysaccharides with many different mono and disaccharide building blocks. You have oligosaccharides that have a few building blocks. Those oligosaccharides are the thing that we as humans can't digest. So this is non-digestible fiber for a person. We lack the enzymes to be able to make those into food, but the bacteria in our gut do have those enzymes. So that's perfect gut food, right? That's the stuff that keeps your microbiome healthy, that keeps your digestive system healthy, and allows bacteria to play the very important role that they have in maintaining human health. Turns out that the carbohydrates that are found in Chardonnay have an extraordinary array of oligosaccharides. And those oligosaccharides that are in there are the right size to feed the microbiome. They're exactly the right, they call it a degree of polymerization. So they have the right DP for the human microbiome, the exact same as human mother's milk, actually, which is considered to
Hmm.
be the best source of oligosaccharides that there is. So if you compare our oligosaccharides from Chardonnay with those in human mother's milk, you see the same degree of polymerization. And you also see a huge variety because you have 11 different building blocks to make oligosaccharides from, where in like legumes and pulses, you only have three. In inulin, which is probably the most common prebiotic fiber that is added to foods, you only have two. And in fact, the researchers who did our work said it's the most complex and rich source of oligosaccharide potential of any plant source they've ever tested.
Huh. So it's a probiotic. Do you ever put it in a pill form, or do you have it in the powder?
So yeah, so actually the term is prebiotic.
Prebiotic.
It
Okay.
Yeah, a probiotic is a live bacteria that you would consume, like a bifidobacteria or lactobacillus,
Uh huh.
and a prebiotic is what feeds those probiotic bacteria, right?
Ah. So you're
So it's the
producing the feed
fertilizer. It's the fertilizer for the
for our
seed.
guts. For
If you
our
think of
guts.
yeah,
Right.
for our guts, you think of probiotic as a seed. Well, the prebiotic is the fertilizer for that seed.
So the other cool thing is you don't have to keep it refrigerated. What is it? Shelf
You
last
don't.
life? Probably a good solid year or so. Would you say to
We've
have?
actually We've actually been making the product that we have now since 2016. We just went back and retested our 2016 material, and it's still very, very good, actually. We've
Wow, that's
done all the
phenomenal.
analysis on it.
So
Yeah.
how do you see this fitting into a diet, a normal diet, or diets around the world where there's lacking nutrients? Where do you see this food being usable, and how often would you recommend taking it? And how would you use it? And besides your chocolate, which we'll get back to, but do you put it in a smoothie? Do you put it how to eat it with your cereal? What's your uh, recommendation with it?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So we know just looking at the USDA every few years they do a survey of kind of the dietary habits of people here in the United States. And we know from those surveys that most people, 80+%, maybe even more, do not get enough fiber in their diet every day.
Yeah.
So people are just not eating enough, let's face it, fresh fruits and vegetables, right? Which is where you get most of your fiber. Or from
Right.
whole grains, and they eat refined grains, not whole grains. The fiber gets stripped out. So
Legumes.
fiber is legumes. They don't eat a lot of those. So all these fiber-rich foods, we're just not eating enough of them,
Yeah.
frankly.
Yeah.
And this can help to fill the gap, that fiber gap that you find. The other gap that we have for a lot of people because of the same thing, not having a lot of plant-based foods that they eat, they end up not getting enough of these flavonols, flavonoids, and polyphenols that we're talking about. So this is a terrific way, Wellvine is, of getting that and getting it in a whole food matrix, because that's what it is. It's a whole food. It just happens to be a food where you've pressed out most of the water and the sugar and dried it, but it's
Hmm.
a whole food. We don't alter it. We don't change it. We try
It's
and
not
preserve it
really
as
even
much
a
as possible.
concentrate. It's not really, even though
It's not.
you've taken a barrel of grapes and you've got it down here. So I guess you'd say it's a bit of a concentrate, but it's not something you've altered. You've just crushed it and dried it and pulverized it, right? So,
Yeah, the only concentration, if you want to think of it that way, is the juicing process.
right.
Remove the
So,
sugar, remove a lot of the water, and what's left is what you have. Yeah.
so you see on the shelves all kinds of different products for fiber that you can take. That comes off of some of it's from the top of the cheese for protein. There's a variety of different fibers out there. How would you say this compares, and how do you use it? I mean, do you put it in a smoothie? What you can't
Yeah,
eat it
so
dry, right?
I think putting it in a smoothie is the best way, Putting it in a
Okay.
smoothie or a shake,
Yogurt, something like
um,
that.
yogurt, that's a great way. You can also bake with it. It's temperature stable, so you can use it in cookies and in breads and that kind of stuff. Generally, you don't want to get too much of it in there because it does have taste and color and other things to it. So
Can alter
if you
things.
stick to somewhere between 5 and 10% of a recipe in baked goods, it works really, really well. If
Uh
you're going
huh.
to do a brownie or a pretzel, you can use more because they have more caramelization and more taste to it. So there's a lot of different ways to use it. I make salad dressing with it. I make barbecue sauce with it.
Wow.
And here's the thing that we didn't know when we started this project, and we discovered it partway through. Um, Chardonnay actually makes other foods taste better, and it does it through what they call a taste cue. So when your brain is sorting through all the things that you put into your mouth and it's getting all this feedback from your tongue and everything, it's trying to decide what's good and what's not. So it's telling you basically, I want you to eat more of this because
Ah,
this is giving me easy energy, or it's giving me a nutrient that I don't normally get, or whatever. And so you have these things called taste cues, and they tell your brain, oh, this I want you to eat more of this. And so when you consume fruit, you get a lot of these taste cues, organic acids, aldehydes, other things that are in there. And those taste cues can help to override the unpleasantness of other foods. So
mhm.
one of the things when we made our chocolate that was a complete discovery, we had no idea, we just got lucky with this, frankly, is that it makes cocoa taste less bitter. Not because there's
Wow.
sugar, you're not covering it up. It's not what they call a bitter blocker. A bitter blocker actually goes in and it prevents the receptors on your tongue from tasting the bitter. It kind of
Hmm.
interferes with it. It's not a bitter blocker. It's not because it has sugar in it that's overly sweet and overpowering. It's because these taste cues kind of override that bitter signal in your
Oh.
brain. And it tells your brain, oh, this is okay. Go ahead and eat more of that.
Well,
So,
for anybody drinking wine, and I'm kind of an old wino, um,
yeah.
I've always justified, and I'm a firm believer, nothing in excess, but I'm a firm believer that wine pairing with your food helps you digest your meal. It can open up your appetite. It can do all kinds of amazing things. So it's not surprising to me what you're saying. But just Chardonnay. I mean, if you played with other varietals of white.
We have looked at other varietals. So we actually now have a granted US patent on decreasing the bitterness of cocoa by adding our Chardonnay to it.
Wow.
When we did that work, we went ahead and tested the other varieties because you have to do some level of testing when you apply for a patent. You have to show that it actually has utility and that it actually works.
Sure, sure.
So we compared it
Uniqueness,
with
right?
other. Right. So we compared it with these other varieties of grapes. We looked at Concord grapes. We also looked at other fruits. And we had a professional taste panel, and they rated it for us. We did it at a university, the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, that's known for doing this kind of work. And what we found out was that Chardonnay actually was much better than the other grape varieties and other fruits at accomplishing this, at
Sure.
decreasing that bitterness.
So why not stick with it? And your purpose for it is not. You're not selling the grape per se. You're selling this as an ingredient for other recipes and for the chocolate. So let's talk about the chocolate itself. Where are you sourcing the chocolate from?
So our chocolate is made by Barry Callebaut, which is they're actually the largest seller and producer of chocolate in the world, by far. So they have operations all over the world, but they have a program that has been set up. It's a foundation that's audited and certified called Cocoa Horizons, and the Cocoa Horizons product is a sustainability and fair trade initiative.
Right.
So we only buy cocoa that's certified through Cocoa Horizons, and most of that comes out of West Africa. Majority of the world's cocoa is actually produced.
And what
So
country
that's where
did
we
you
get
say
it
that?
from.
What country is that? Or is it several
Well, it
countries?
varies.
So
It's
it could be
several
the
countries over
Congo,
there.
yeah,
Yeah,
Republic of the
I
Congo,
believe,
maybe.
I don't know for sure, but it's there's a lot of production in Ghana. There's some in the Cote
Hmm.
d'Ivoire. There's a lot of different countries, I think, that have cocoa farming as a fairly significant part of the economy.
Right. Now, with this whole venture, you're getting Chardonnay grapes from. Are you a wine drinker yourself, or is that something you?
No,
Um,
I do drink wine. I'm spoiled because I have the owners and founders of Sonoma Barbara Banke and Peggy Firth. They both have decades in the wine industry, so they
Hmm.
curate most of my wine drinking, which is really nice. And
It's always
you know,
helpful to have a little expertise behind what you're doing. Yeah, I mean, you got to drink. You end up drinking a lot of wine, but I'm always of the belief that you're better off drinking a better wine because there's only so much wine we can drink in our life. You might as well have the best you can get and make sure you're pairing it right. So I
that's
actually
a great
became
way to look at it.
I became a sommelier not because I'm really in that industry. I mean, I bartended back in the day and waited tables and stuff, but I became a
Hmm.
sommelier only because I'm was interested in it. And so when I travel, I go to vineyards and I go and I'm looking at the terroir. I'm looking at the soils and what they're doing. And I was in New Zealand and Côte d'Azur this year, and I looked and but drought is a real thing, you know, and wine growers are not sure with climate change. They're getting the water at the wrong time, or too much, or too little. And it's just like any other kind of farming practice. It's making people who've been doing now wine is an incredible commodity because a lot of the better vineyards are multi-generational, right? So I was talking
Hmm.
with someone in France in February that had a winery in the family since the 1500s, but they're in an area that, no, actually that was in Spain. They're in an area that just doesn't get that much water, and so they're starting to struggle, and that's where we talk about the soil. So it's everything, you know, everything is connected that we're dealing with. But Peggy and you said you had two,
Barbara.
and Barbara,
Hmm.
they are the ones who are behind the Chardonnay part of this, and
Well, this was their vision right from the very beginning, is to
really,
take, yeah, I mean, you think about it. You spend all this time and effort. You know a lot about farming. You've spent a lot of time with the land and a lot of time, cultivating plants, both plants that can be eaten and those that just make for better living and a nicer environment. You create this beautiful crop here, and you have all of these wonderful berries that you spend all this time and effort in cultivating, and then you squeeze out the juice, and you've got all this wonderful fruit left over, right?
yeah, yeah, all that
And it
cake.
just seemed like such a waste not to be doing something with it. So their vision was to find, you used this phrase earlier, a higher, better use for the fruit that was left over and not just the juice. And that was really the idea. Increase, not just capturing more value from it, but you can increase global food security. You're a better steward of the land when you're taking that product of the land and doing something with it other than just, at best composting it, right? And
Right.
at worst, it may go someplace where you have to remediate or do other things. So that was the vision behind it. And in the course of trying to make that vision come to fruition, we found out all these other things, like Chardonnay has this extraordinary taste modification capability. It also has extraordinary oligosaccharide levels and profiles that you don't find in other plants. And in fact, what we're learning now is that, contrary to everyone's assumption, white wine grapes, may be just as healthy for you and perhaps healthier grapes in some ways. As
Yeah.
a food for your microbiome and your digestive system, these white grapes are extraordinarily useful. They're a superfood, like we just talked about, right?
Yeah.
So we call it the Sonoma paradox instead of the French paradox. That
Ah, I love it.
the white grape can be just as good for you as the red grape.
Yeah, of course they have a lot of good white grapes in France too, and the
Well, they
rosés and
do. I mean,
everything they're doing. I mean,
yeah.
they're still the leader in that field. You know, I whether you want them to be or not, they produce some good stuff. But we do a lot of good stuff
No
in that
argument
Napa
there.
area and up in Oregon
Yep.
too with the Pinot Noirs and some of the stuff we have. And it's all about what grows best on that land, and it's all about the
Sure.
expertise. And we're a few hundred years behind, is all here, but making great inroads to that. Now, you're how often do you end up going to Napa then? Where do you actually produce the? You take you're producing your powder, and then you're
Mhm.
getting your chocolate in from Africa. Where does that all come together? Where does that get blended?
So all of our grapes come from coastal and mountain vineyards,
Okay.
which means you're a terroir guy.
Uh
You
huh. Uh huh.
appreciate these differences, right?
Different
So
minerals.
one of the things, yeah, there was actually a study that was published 3 years ago, I believe, Australia, and they looked at aromatics and tastants and some of these other compounds that um, they provide color and they provide taste and everything in wine, but in the human health arena, these are the same compounds that are often responsible for a lot of the biological effects and the antioxidant effects. So they looked at those compounds and they saw more of those compounds being expressed in areas where the grapes could cool down a little bit at night.
So up on the
So they
hill.
looked at what they call growing degree days. Yep. So closer to the coast or at a higher elevation, you see more of these compounds being formed. And so that's where we get our grapes from. In fact, that's what Jackson Family Wine specializes in, is grapes that are grown in these areas. So we're very careful about that. We get what we believe are the higher quality grape for what we're looking for. That's one of the keys to sourcing our product and our material. And then we take all of those grapes and we do the processing and such, and we turn it into a powder. And then we have contract manufacturers that actually make the chocolate for us and that put it into these bags and such. And they're located in different parts of the country. We have people working on this project in Wisconsin. We have some here in Utah, and we have, of course, the Barry Callebaut organization, which has multiple facilities all over the world. They're headquartered in Belgium. We've had chocolate made in Mexico. We've had chocolate made here in the U.S. So just depends on what it is for what we're trying to accomplish.
And you're using primarily a darker chocolate, a cocoa, because you've taken the bitterness out with the Chardonnay, so it allows you to go. And it's interesting the evolution of our taste buds, right? And I
Yep.
gotta say, it's the one advantage of getting older in my mind. We may not see, smell, or walk as well as we did when we were younger, but we've learned enough about our own bodies and how they react. And I've gone through periods where I was only drinking reds, and then got back into both white and red based on what I'm eating, but also even during the meal, I like to start it off with a white or a sparkling wine or something, and then as it goes on, depending on what the meal is all about, getting into some different reds. And so you learn that, but it's the same exploration with chocolate. I've been, down in Mexico. I've been in Africa. I've been in. I was just in Nicaragua, and I went to different cocoa, and that's a tough little plant to grow. I mean, that's. You wonder. I really, what amazes me is that how humans have figured some of this stuff out, but we don't do it in necessarily in one or two lifetimes. This is cumulative over a period of. We've been farming for 10,000 years around the world, and so there's shared experience and different people trying different things, but it still kind of blows me away when you know that this particular grape works really well with this particular food. And it's the same thing with the chocolates. So, do you have a variety of different chocolates, or is it you've just come up with like this perfect blend? And do you use that
Yeah.
by the way, and recommend that with certain wine pairings?
So a lot to unpack there. I really like the way you talk about that and you explain how those culinary experiences are layered, right? You have all these different things that you can kind of not just enjoy together, but they actually help to build on one another. And
Sure. Help you
um, you
digest
know,
too, right?
they do. And one of the things that's really interesting, I'll just kind of throw this out there that a lot of people don't realize is you have taste receptors in places in your body other than just your mouth and your digestive
Mm-hmm.
system.
Right, right.
You have these sensing receptors all over, and so when you're eating things, these receptors are sampling all of this stuff all the time, and it affects hormone levels. It affects the way that your body uses energy. It affects your mood. It affects GLP-1, for example. We know that if you take too much sweet in, you'll suppress GLP-1, and if you actually have some good bitter compounds, not just in your mouth, but in these other receptor sites, and that's phenols do, by the way, that can have an effect on GLP-1. So there's all kinds of things going on there that are related to this complexity of diet and complexity of experience that really does have more to do with just the functioning of your body than people realize. And it's not all about pleasure. It's not all about just the experience and the hedonism of eating food. It's also about the fact that your system is trying to tell you something. It's trying to tell you that having a variety of foods and a variety of experiences is good for you on a physiological level, not just a psychological level, right?
Yeah, it's
So,
what's so amazing about that is that you as we become, I think we're becoming a little more sophisticated now, of course, because of mass communication and electronic communication, and the fact that
yeah,
this is centuries in the making. But we're still confused as a world, right? There's still people who are not getting enough food, or people who are very localized and they're stuck eating whatever's right there. But the idea, what I think is amazing is the idea of being able to blend that hedonism. I don't want to ever lose that. It's what I live for, you know. But the ability of blending that with health, and to be able to be healthier, yet to be able to really enjoy these different foods. And I always think about it, it's kind of crazy, is that the biggest experimentation that goes on for each individual on the planet goes on every single day with what's going in our bodies, whether it's atmospheric pollution or it's the various different foods we eat. And it's kind of crazy how we get in little ruts, or we think we're eating this healthy thing, and then we're realizing, well, wait a second, you're not completely balanced, you know, and so there's it's the great thing about being kind of in our world, in agriculture or into foods and doing the things you're doing, because I can't imagine there being a better calling or something that's more into me. Maybe I'm a geek, but to me, this stuff is like the coolest thing. You know, if you're literally growing something that can taste better, but can benefit human wellness. I mean, how much better can it get than that?
it's immensely satisfying. It really is. And the idea that eh, when I was growing up, and you too, I think the message was you need to eat healthy, even though it's not going to be as much fun. You're not going to enjoy it, but you need to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Eat your vegetables, they're good for you, right? And a lot of the vegetables when I was a kid, if you ate broccoli, it was boiled to the point where it was limp
Yeah.
and
Sounds like
mushy and had
sounds
no
like my mom.
color, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what you got at the
Yeah.
school lunch cafeteria. It's what was served in a lot of restaurants. It was just, they treated all of those things very differently, and
Throw a
it was
little
something.
cheese, throw a little American cheese on it to make it palatable, right?
There you go.
Or butter.
Cover it in butter or something
Right.
like that. And so I think that perception that things that are good for you aren't going to be a very good experience, that you have to make a compromise. And we certainly heard that a lot when we told people we have an upcycled ingredient. Well, if it's upcycled, it's not going to be as good as a regular product, but it'll be better for you and better for the planet. So you eat it anyway, right? This is kind of
Sure.
the attitude that people have. And then we found out Chardonnay actually makes chocolate taste better, not worse. It
Yeah,
actually improves
that's
the
amazing.
experience. and it creates a new experience, an experience that has these bright, crisp notes to it that you can't get from cocoa alone, that are really, really interesting and complementary, right? So, and I think people are really waking up to this idea. Anyone who's eaten in a good farm to table restaurant knows this,
Oh
that
yeah.
you can have a healthy, really diverse experience that's also at the pinnacle of culinary hedonism, and not feel guilty about it, and not do something that's terrible for your body. Those two things can coexist. I would argue that it's actually the best way to experience food, that eating
Yeah.
healthy, fresh, well prepared food is a better experience from a
Well, it's
hedonistic point of view than
from a
the overly processed, overly
absolutely.
sweet, overly fat food that a lot of people have been
Well,
told is the
once you
best.
start gardening and or farming, you learn really quickly that nutrients are within 24 hours, really within hours. So if you can grow your own stuff and you know how it was grown, you know exactly what seeds you used and what your soil was all about, and then you can take that and you can literally either cook it or eat it raw or blend it into your meal, and you're doing that within hours. It's very perceptible. Sometimes I think we mask that perceptibility with the foods we currently eat. You know, if we're having too much sodium and or too much sugar, your taste buds aren't really actually as receptive as they could be if you're so in other words, if you start eating healthier foods taste better to you than the processed foods. But there is that switch, and you're right, it's a psychological thing that everyone goes through, and this whole dilemma of what should we have on our plate, and it goes back to my mother, grandmother saying, everything in moderation, first off the bat, but then understanding and selecting foods that you know are good, and keeping a little hedonism in that process allows you to be able to have a better lifestyle when it comes right down to it. So okay, I'm
And
gonna.
I think you'll be healthier to boot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to switch a little to our Africa trip. Well, first, I'm going to be going back. I do hemp seed work with my partners in Arizona, but also in California. Um,
Okay.
and we're going to start growing some of that in Africa as well with the projects we have. We're in 3 countries right now in Africa, and over 20 different projects, and we're always looking to do. The cool thing about Africa is we can do really weird things over there, or things that are not conventional or traditional, and the people embrace doing it that we work with, and a lot of stuff actually works. So I'm getting actually a little press to press seeds for oils, so we can make soaps for one reason and one thing, but using the oils for cooking and all of that is just a byproduct of sunflower that is being grown or olives that are being grown. So it's a cool experience, and I'd love to have because you have that background in microbiology and you got a passion for that. So hopefully, if I go to California and I meet with you and your partners, and you had mentioned something before, because before I go into that, you mentioned something about what your partners said. They're big in the wine industry, right? They're not just pioneers, but they're the mountains right now in that
Loose.
space. But
Yeah.
you were saying they don't even consider themselves winemakers per se. What was the phrase you just used?
Well, it all starts with the land. I mean,
Yeah,
at its heart, if you are a winemaker who grows your own grapes, and not all do, a lot of the large wine companies, they just
sure.
buy
They just
fruit,
blend.
and
Hmm.
it's just a business, and they blend it all together. But if you're connected to it, if you're connected to the land, it's about the land. So really, you know, what what I've heard, Barbara say is, we are essentially a land company and an agriculture. We just happen to grow wine grapes on our land. That's the use we use. But it all comes back to the land itself.
Yeah,
That's where it all starts.
I don't think
Back to the grape.
you can grow anything or create any product without taking land management. And land management just really means being cognizant of what you're doing, right? Whether or not you have
Mhm.
a cover crops or you're doing things in rotation or you're just being observant to your ecosystem and how that land can be managed. It's not a political thing and it's not a necessarily a financial thing. I do think that financially you'll get rewarded by just doing that extra little bit of homework or that work and stewarding the land. So I love that quote. I already know that I would love walking the land with you and your partners and looking at what you have. And at this point, you need a lot more because you produce a lot of Chardonnay, I imagine, right? So, what fraction of the wine you're making right now goes into the powders? It's got to be super small at this point, right?
Yeah, at this point it is. I mean, we just barely launched these products a couple of months ago.
Great.
The chocolate we've been working with for a while, but we ended up launching that during the pandemic, and so it took us a while to get our feet, of course, for that. It's hard to
Sure.
get distribution and such. So right now it's still in the single digit percentages
Yeah.
of the
Good.
total crop.
Well, that's great.
But, yeah, but it's a big start,
It's an
in my
opportunity for the
opinion,
future. Sure.
conceptually, and yeah, and in terms of what can be done here. We actually ended up last year, we were featured on the cover of the Journal of Food and Agricultural Chemistry as a model for how you can do upcycled agricultural products, right? Taste, health, and sustainability. Those are the three pillars that we really focus on. So there was an article that highlighted that and highlighted our approach to it. And the other thing that I will point out is that if you actually look at what Jackson Family Wines is doing from a sustainability point of view, they're by far the leaders in sustainability in the wine industry. They've started their own initiative called Rooted for Good, that's all about creating more sustainable wine production. They have 100 SIP certification for all of their vineyards. SIP is called Sustainability in Practice. It is to sustainability what certified organic would be, roughly for organic and regenerative type farming. So they
Hmm.
have sustainability in practice certification for everything they do. They really are the leaders. Katie Jackson, who is Barbara's daughter, she frequently, gives lectures and speeches on what the industry could do there. She's been recognized as one of the top upcoming wine executives in the world. And I would argue that they're, of all the major wine companies, they're easily the one who's the most interested and the most forward thinking in that area.
Great. Yeah, I can't wait to drop in
Love to
and
have you there.
insert myself and invite myself into
The
to a
other thing that you should look
podcast
at,
in the field. Sure. What?
there you go. It's really interesting to hear you were a sommelier. I didn't know that, but if you go to the Vine to Bar website and you look through, some of our blogs and such, we've done online tastings and pairings with our chocolate and different wines.
Ah.
And I don't know if you know Michael Jordan. He's a
Uh huh.
sommelier as well.
Uh huh.
So Michael does these pairings for us. So you'll go on there, and we actually have those videos that you can go back and view that
Ah.
give
Okay.
different recommendations for using our chocolates and the different wines that they go with.
Yeah, that's great. So we start by. I think I've got to go out to Fresno area. We'll probably be harvesting. I think it's like September 21st, but I'll be going out earlier than that. Um,
Okay,
and from there, kind of shoot up. That'd be before you guys are picking or anything, but we'd see stuff pretty full on
we'll
the
we'll
property,
start.
right?
Yeah, we'll start picking in. It depends on the year. End of August, 1st of September. Different varieties, depending on what
Okay.
it is. Whether you know. So, and of course, we do have some sparkling wines that we make, which are picked early. So it just depends on what you're talking about. But harvest generally begins right around that last week of August, 1st of September.
If you got a big operation, it takes a lot of time and a lot of talented pickers. I've done the picking myself, and I would not qualify myself as talented whatsoever. I can't even visualize thousands of acres of picking, but I definitely want to go out, and I'd love to see what products they're using, if they're using any organic composting, and by the way, the cakes that they do actually make a great compost. I just don't get enough of those, but I would definitely love blending some of that into, and that's what I kind of enjoy is blending all these waste stream products into creating superior nutrient value for the soil. But so we'll do that. I'm definitely taking more of your time than I should have, but
Not at all. This has been a really great conversation, and I think it would be tremendously valuable too for for our vineyard managers and everyone to talk to you about the techniques you use. I'm sure there's a lot there that we could learn, and so it'd be fascinating to have
what do
you
you
come out.
guys? What do you do with the community itself? I mean, you're doing lectures. Sounded like Katie's doing lectures. Do you have
Mhm.
any offshoot nonprofit stuff that you do, or
So the wine company does. We're a separate organization. We
sure.
actually aren't funded by the wine company. We're sister companies, if you want to think of it that way, right? So we share
Okay.
owners, but we don't share assets or finances or anything. So the wine company has a lot of different initiatives that they work with, a lot of charitable work and such. We're pretty small now. We'd certainly like to do more of that as we move ahead and as the company gets its footing under it. And that's part of the long-term plan. Currently, we don't do a whole lot of donating or creating a foundation or anything like that. But we're certainly active in the community of what I would call upcycling, sustainability,
That's great.
and more responsible ways of using land and being stewards of the land.
Well, our organization, Urban Farming Education, is available for your use, and we're doing things, on around the planet. But we can talk more about that when we go out to visit. I'll definitely stay in touch. By the way, I did order.
Love to.
I've ordered some of your chocolates. I didn't. I don't know if we've ordered the powder or not, but now I got to get that, and we'll see how that works. And I'm sure I've got some Jackson wine in my cellar, so I'll have a little clip that I'll add on to this where I'm eating chocolates from Virginia, peanuts from Virginia from my last podcast guest, and I'll have your chocolate and some of that wine, and I'll display some of my hedonism for everyone to
That'd be
see.
wonderful.
But and I'll give everybody an evaluation of it. So, but hey, I
And
appreciate
we'll
you.
we'll explore plenty of that when you come to California.
Absolutely, nothing better than testing and doing trials. So,
There you
Scott
go.
Forsberg, I appreciate you coming with your company Vine to Bar. And we'll definitely be in touch. We'll definitely stay connected.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay,
It's been a
take
pleasure.
care. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey. And until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.